What would you do if your entire family erased you on purpose? I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. The lawyer's voice echoed across the gleaming walnut table, like a gavel final and unforgiving to Vanessa Whitman $10 million in trust and all remaining real estate assets. My sister beamed like she'd just won a pageant. My parents, Betty and Jacob, clutched each other's hands, their smiles smug and satisfied. Then, with practiced cruelty, they turned to me. "You'll have to earn your own," my father said with a polite shrug. My mother didn't even pretend to look ashamed. The room spun for a second, not from shock, but from clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. They wanted me erased, cut from the legacy, cut from the narrative, cut from memory. And I knew. They thought they'd won. But that's when everything shifted. A quiet voice, gravelly and deliberate, cut through the silence. "There's one more document." The man who stood wasn't one of my parents' lawyers. He wore a gray wool suit and held a yellowed envelope so carefully it looked like it might crumble. It had my grandfather's handwriting on it. My mother's smile cracked like glass. My father's fingers twitched. Vanessa straightened eyes narrowing. That envelope didn't just change the room, it changed the equation. It was the start of something they could never control. And it would take me back to the last place I ever thought I'd return my grandfather's ranch on the edge of Charleston. I hadn't seen the ranch in over a year, not since the spring before Grandpa died. The gravel under my tires sounded louder than I remembered, crunching like bones beneath memory. The magnolia trees still lined the property, their blooms defiant and sweet against the bitter weight in my chest. As I stepped out, wind chimes clanged from the porch. They used to sound like summer afternoons and iced tea. Now they sounded hollow, like betrayal. I hesitated before knocking on the chipped white door. Then it opened without warning, and there she was, my grandmother, still sharp as a pine needle, still cold as February rain. So she said, "You finally decided to show up." Her arms crossed tightly over her chest, jaw set like stone. She didn't move. I tried to read her expression. Was there warmth beneath the glare? A flicker of relief? Nothing. Only frost. "Grandma, what's going on?" I asked, stepping closer. Her voice cracked before she caught herself. "They told me you were too busy, that you didn't care, that you had a new life." She turned away, walking into the house. Her silence dragged behind her like a chain. I followed, barely breathing. She handed me something, a leather-bound notepad. "This," she said, her voice flat, "is the number your grandfather kept calling." I glanced down. Block letters. Grandpa's handwriting. My heart clenched. But the number, it wasn't mine, not even close. "Grandma." "I've had the same number since college," I whispered. She stared at the page like it had betrayed her. "They told us you changed it," she murmured. "Said you didn't want to be found, that you were ashamed of us." I leaned back against the floral wallpaper, trying not to collapse. "No," I said, shaking my head. "They lied. They cut me off. They made sure I never knew he was sick." Her face paled. Her hands trembled. "I didn't even know when the funeral was. They told me noon. I showed up and the church was empty." She blinked, stunned. "The funeral was at 9. They told everyone I didn't show," I said softly, "that I didn't care." Grandma sank into a chair, not from shock, but grief. Grief reawakened and repurposed. And then something in the air changed. She looked up. Her eyes weren't wet. They were burning. I'm calling them. Calling who I asked. But she was already moving. Toward the old rotary phone Grandpa refused to replace. She spun the dial slowly, each number loud and deliberate, like the ticking of a time bomb. "Betty, Jacob, Vanessa," she said into the receiver. "Be here in an hour. No, it can't wait." She hung up without another word. Then she turned to me, steady and resolute. "The lawyer's on his way too. Your grandfather left instructions, said everything needed to be read in front of everyone." I said nothing. I didn't have to, because finally, Someone had decided to hear the truth. The wind outside stirred like it knew what was coming. I sat at the old kitchen table, same oak, same faint coffee rings from Grandpa's mugs, and traced my fingers along the grain. This was where he'd ask me about my research, even when no one else in the family bothered to ask if I was eating. The air inside the ranch had changed, heavier now, dense with the weight of truth, long ignored. Footsteps echoed across the porch, a knock, then voices. I stayed hidden in the kitchen just as Grandma asked. I heard my mother first, that syrupy tone she used in public. "Oh my goodness, it smells exactly the same in here." Then my father, cool and bored, I thought this was handled already. And then Vanessa, dismissive, sharp. Seriously. This couldn't wait until the estate's finalized. They didn't know I was here. Not yet. Then Grandma's voice, clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Please sit down. Mr. Harold Keene is on his way. He'll be reading Walter's final instructions." I imagined their confusion, maybe even annoyance. They thought they'd tied everything up neatly with a bow. They thought their version of the story had already been written in stone. But Grandpa wasn't done writing. When the lawyer arrived, his voice was calm, firm, unmistakably final. "This won't take long," he said, "but it must be done properly," and that was my cue. Grandma's voice came from the other room. "Claire, come in now." 3 words, but they carried the weight of justice. I stood, took one step, then another, until I crossed the threshold between the kitchen and living room. 3 heads turned, 3 faces unraveled. My mother's smile froze mid-performance. My father's jaw tensed, that old nervous tick flickering at his temple. Vanessa's face lost all color. She looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. No one said a word. I didn't cower. I sat down in the empty chair across from them. Calm, present, unshaken. Mr. Keene opened a manila envelope and cleared his throat. "This is the last will and testament of Walter R. Whitman," he began. In addition to the standard legal provisions, Mr. Whitman requested that several items be read aloud in front of the family. He turned the page. "To my wife, Margaret Whitman." Grandma didn't blink. "I leave the family ranch, including the house and all designated funds for her care and comfort. She knows how to find the rest." Then another pause. Then my name. "To my granddaughter, Claire Whitman." The room froze. "I leave the Whitman Research Annex at 317 Laurel Creek Road, Charleston, including all lab equipment funding accounts, intellectual property under Whitman Innovation, and any pending research patents." A gasp cut the air like a whip, not mine. Vanessa's eyes flared. My mother blinked rapidly. My father shifted uncomfortably, but I sat still, folded hands, straight spine. Then came the rest, the remainder of Mr. Whitman's estate, his stocks, financial holdings, and retirement funds shall be divided equally between his 2 granddaughters, Claire and Vanessa Whitman. Silence. And then, explosion. Vanessa shoved her chair back. "What?" He gave her the annex. "The entire facility," her voice cracked. "You promised me," she said, turning to our parents. "You told me if I just visited him, smiled, played nice, it would all be mine." My father didn't respond. My mother stared at the carpet. I watched them, not with vengeance, with clarity. And then the lawyer spoke again. "There's more." Vanessa let out a bitter, hollow laugh. But no one else did. Grandma handed him a folded letter. Her voice was softer now, but resolute. He made me promise to read it. It's his final letter to Claire, to be read in front of everyone. Mr. Keene unfolded the page. "To my dearest Claire." The words hit like sunlight after a storm. If this is being read, then I'm no longer by your side. But my belief in you remains stronger than ever. Vanessa slumped. My mother swallowed hard. My father adjusted his collar, silent. "You were always the quiet one," the letter continued. "The thinker. The one who asked why when others didn't care to. I didn't cry, but my chest cracked open, slow and wide. You built your own truth in a family that never honored it. You were never a mistake, Claire. You were the legacy I was proudest of. I let his words wash over me. I wanted every single one of them to hear what love really sounded like. I remember the day you won your first science fair and asked me to hide the trophy. You said, maybe if I don't show it, they'll stop looking at me like I'm someone else's child. A sharp inhale, my mother. I didn't turn toward her. Vanessa sparkled in ways they understood he wrote. But you glowed in ways they never tried to translate. And instead of learning your language, they shut you out. I saw Vanessa's mouth twitch. She crossed her arms clenched tight. I don't blame her entirely, the letter read. She played the part they gave her. But you wrote your own role. Mr. Keene folded the paper slowly. The silence that followed was thunderous. I broke it. I remember that science fair, I said quietly. Mom didn't come. She was at Vanessa's rehearsal. Vanessa looked away. My father muttered, Claire, this isn't the time to dig up the past. No, I said louder now. It's the only time. Because all I ever got from either of you was, why can't you just be more like your sister? I turned to Vanessa. And from you, every time I was proud of something, you turned it into a threat. She scoffed. You always made yourself the victim. I worked for what I got. No, I said. Calm, direct, you performed, you smiled when it paid off, you visited when it benefited you, you manipulated. Her eyes flared. You disappeared. I shook my head. I was erased. You were erased, Vanessa hissed. That's dramatic even for you. I didn't flinch. You told Grandma I didn't want to see her, I said. You gave Grandpa a fake number. You stood at the doorway in March and said nobody was home while he lay inside asking for me. Her eyes narrowed the line between defiance and fear flashing across her face. My mother stood abruptly, the air thick with panic. Enough, Claire. You're twisting everything. This family's been through. Li's grandma interrupted. Her voice cut through the room like an earthquake under marble. This family has been living a lie, and I let it happen too long. My mother froze. Her shoulders stiffened like armor cracking beneath pressure. Mother, no, Grandma said sharply. I believed you when you said Claire didn't care. I believed you when you said she chose her own path and left us behind. But you lied. The silence that followed wasn't fragile. It was razor sharp. My father finally spoke half-hearted and defensive. Claire got her education, her research grants, her travel. That wasn't free. No, I said, it wasn't. But you didn't pay for it. Grandpa did. They looked stunned, guilty. He found the scholarships, booked the flights, ordered the journals. He was the one who knew I wanted to study plant cognition. You didn't even know what continent I was on most of the time. My voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the weight of remembering. You made me feel like a burden. He made me feel seen. Vanessa jumped to her feet, the heat of losing control boiling over. This is ridiculous. I was told I'd get everything. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who tried. I was the good daughter. No, I said firmly, my voice like glass about to break. You were the performer, the one they chose because you didn't ask questions. You said the right things, smiled at the right moments. But love isn't a performance. And Grandpa saw that. She took a step closer, her voice a hiss. Why should you get anything, just because you're a sad little genius in a lab coat? I exhaled slowly, then smiled just a little. No, I get something, because I earned his love honestly. And that's the one thing you never understood. Love isn't strategic. It's not an exchange. It's not leverage. You can't manipulate it. You either give it or you don't. Vanessa blinked. For once, she had no comeback. Then Grandma stood up, and the room changed again. She walked forward, slow, deliberate like justice, wearing soft shoes. I regret that Walter left you anything she said looking directly at Vanessa. You played the part, but it was never love. It was a transaction, and I am ashamed I didn't see it sooner. Vanessa opened her mouth, but Grandma didn't stop. You used us. You used him. And you tried to erase Claire because she made you feel small. She turned to all three of them, her daughter, her son-in-law, her golden granddaughter, and delivered a sentence they never saw coming. Leave. You are not welcome here. My mother gasped, reaching for composure like it might save her. Mom, please. Out, Grandma said again, voice steady. My father muttered something about legal challenges. Vanessa grabbed her bag and stormed to the door, each step a gunshot against the hardwood floor. They didn't slam the door. They didn't yell. They just left stripped of power illusions and legacy. And for the first time in my life, they couldn't take anything with them. Not the house, not the money, not me. I stood there unmoving as the silence reclaimed the space. No tension, no explosions, just quiet. A quiet that didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like freedom. Grandma walked past me slow and composed and sank into the old sofa by the fireplace, her hands still now, her eyes calmer than I'd seen in years. They'll come back, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. Maybe she replied. But this time, we don't have to let them in. It took a while for those words to sink in. For years, I'd lived on a silent contract. If I prove myself enough, if I achieve enough, if I stay useful, maybe they'll finally see me. But standing there in that room, still buzzing with Grandpa's words, I realized something brutal and freeing. I had spent my life trying to earn love from people who never had any to give. And Grandpa, he saw that long before I did. The house settled after they left like it had been holding its breath for years. I didn't rush to speak. I didn't try to fill the silence. I just stood in the same room where everything had crumbled except me. Grandma rose slowly and headed to the kitchen. I followed. She placed a kettle on the stove, her hands no longer trembling. Her movements had purpose, now not habit. You know, she said after a moment not looking up, Walter started planning that annex 5 years ago, before he even got sick. I blinked. He told me he wanted to build you a space, she continued, that didn't require permission to be yourself. The tears didn't fall like before. They came quiet, steady. Not grief, just release. That night, I stayed in my old room for the first time in over a decade. The wallpaper was faded, the mattress too soft, but the ceiling still had those glow-in-the-dark constellations. I remembered how I made Grandpa stick them in scientifically accurate formations. He never even questioned it. That was the difference. He never needed me to translate myself. The next morning, I brewed the coffee, brought 2 mugs to the same kitchen table I used to avoid when my parents visited. Grandma folded her newspaper, gave me a tired, warm smile. "So what now?" she asked. I looked out the window. Sunlight poured across the magnolia branches. "I think I go see it," I said. "The annex, the lab." She nodded, her expression unreadable but proud. He'd like that. I didn't expect the annex to feel like much, not after everything. But the moment I pulled up to the converted barn at the end of a dusty road off Laurel Creek, I felt something shift again. The outside was simple tin roof, wide beams, double doors that looked like they belonged on a stable. But inside was magic. Sunlight spilled through east-facing glass panels. Tables gleamed under their covers. Microscopes, centrifuges, a 3D printer still wrapped in plastic, shelves lined with boxes labeled with my name, and at the center, a single workbench. On top of it, my childhood notebook, the one I thought I'd lost in college, the one with coffee stains, ripped corners, and wild diagrams of honeybee communication systems. I dropped to my knees. Grandpa hadn't just built me a lab. He built me a home for my mind. In the weeks that followed, I moved in. I reached out to 2 friends from my grad program, Tara and Micah. Both of them brilliant, a little strange, just like me. We formed a team, a real one. No masks, no performances. We started with a micro-irrigation grant, then a partnership with a regional farming co-op. Every success felt earned. Every failure felt survivable. There were broken beakers and missed deadlines. We cried over rejected funding applications and celebrated when the data finally made sense. We built something. More importantly, we belonged. Late one night, I sat alone on the annex floor. The others had gone home. The air was thick with printer dust and stale coffee. I pulled Grandpa's letter from my bag and unfolded it for the 100th time. "You wrote your own role." I whispered it into the dark. It wasn't a compliment. It was an instruction. So I picked myself up, wiped the dust off my jeans, and started a new proposal. Not for a grant, but for a dream. We called it the Little Scientist Initiative. 12 students, rural schools. Kids like me, quiet, overlooked, too curious for their own good. We gave them each a leather-bound notebook, a replica of mine. Inside, stamped in gold, were Grandpa's words: "Write the things they don't understand. One day the world will." One of those kids was a 13-year-old named Amber, shy, always hiding behind her hair, but her notebook filled with bee behavior observations she'd done on her own. Clumsy math, wild spelling, but brilliant patterns. When I told her that, she stared at me like I'd handed her the moon. "You actually read it," she whispered. I smiled. Of course I did. And that's when I realized this wasn't about replacing what I'd lost. It was about planting something new, in better soil, and letting it grow without fear. 3 years after the will reading the past reached out to me again. It came not through a knock or a letter, but a digital ghost, an email from a law firm. Subject line: request for visit, Vanessa Whitman, Ina Claire Whitman, Innovation Annex. My chest tightened. My first instinct was simple no. I assumed it was a challenge, a backdoor attempt to reopen the estate, a demand to claw back what Grandpa had given me. But when she arrived, I barely recognized her. No designer heels, no perfect curls, no flawless lipstick. Vanessa wore an oversized navy coat, her face bare, her expression hollow. She walked like someone trying not to take up space. I stood near Grandpa's portrait mounted high on the annex lobby wall. He was smiling in it, quiet, knowing. She paused in front of the image. "He always knew who you were," she said softly, "even when I didn't, especially then." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. "I'd like to see it," she added, her voice barely audible. "The lab, the work, what you've built." I could have said no, I had every reason to, but I didn't. I nodded once and began walking. She moved slowly, as if afraid her footsteps would disturb something sacred. I showed her the greenhouse complexes, the crop development zones, the student showcase wall filled with photos and quotes from our Little Scientist Initiative kids. She asked honest questions. How do you fund this? What does that machine do? Do the kids get to publish their findings? No posturing, no defensiveness. When we reached the community garden now, a half-acre plot maintained by local families using our sustainable models, she stopped walking. Children were pulling up heads of lettuce. A mother and son laughed near the compost bins. A man tested soil moisture beside rows of tomatoes. Vanessa turned to me, her voice cracking. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I stayed silent. I just wanted to see what he built for you and what you built with it. Her hands fidgeted. She kept tugging her sleeves, tracing the railing with invisible patterns. She didn't cry. She didn't make excuses. And for the first time since we were kids, I didn't see her as the golden daughter or the saboteur. I saw someone lost in the wreckage of choices she couldn't undo. I let her stay. No lectures, no accusations, just presence. We don't talk often, but twice a year, Vanessa volunteers at the youth science camp. She teaches presentation skills, helps kids explain their data in plain English, shows them how to stand tall even when their voice shakes. The kids adore her. Some even call her Coach V. At the end of her first summer volunteering, she handed me a folder, thin hand-typed. I made a communication guide, she said, almost shy, for the quiet kids. I thought, it might help. Later that night, I read every word. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, thoughtful, gentle. And for the first time in my life, I saw a version of my sister that didn't scare me. She never said she was sorry, but she shows up. And sometimes that's more than an apology could ever hold. We're not sisters in the way people imagine. There's no holiday brunches or Instagram hugs. But in this corner of the world, Grandpa dreamed up we've stopped pretending. And maybe that's the beginning of something true. It's been 6 years since the will reading. 6 years since the front door clicked shut behind my parents and Vanessa, their footsteps echoing down the porch like the end of a performance no one clapped for. I haven't spoken to my parents since. Sometimes their names show up in email chains. I don't open donor lists, financial reports, charity events in Florida, where they now live early retired and reputation polished. I don't hate them, but I don't miss them either. What I think about is the work. The annex has grown beyond anything I ever imagined. One converted barn became a full research campus, 4 labs, 3 greenhouses, over 60 acres of experimental fields. We've developed drought-resistant seeds now used in southern counties where crops once failed year after year. We've formed partnerships with universities from Kenya to Brazil, sharing open-source agricultural models for regenerative soil health. Last month, I stood on a stage in San Francisco accepting a National Climate Innovation Grant. I wore a navy blue suit and Grandpa's old pocket watch in my chest pocket, the one Grandma gave me last year. The face slightly faded, the chain worn smooth. Inside the lid, a tiny photo of me age 10 beside my honeybee science fair project. Grinning, gap-toothed proud. He carried it every day, Grandma had whispered. Now it sits on my desk by the east window. The light hits it in the morning, casting golden rings over my research notes. Sometimes I talk to him there. Not with words, with silence, the kind filled with meaning. I think about how close I came to believing I didn't matter, that I was too quiet, too intense, too much of the wrong kind of different. He never let me believe that. He never let me disappear. And now I understand why. Legacy isn't marble statues or bank accounts. It's something quieter. It's a map, made of choices, made of belief, made of tiny invisible anchors left for someone who might one day need to find their way back. These days, Grandma lives in a small apartment connected to my house in town. She moves slower now, forgets small things. But when it matters, she's sharper than ever. We drink coffee in the sunroom most mornings. She tells me stories about Grandpa I never knew, like how he once planted a tree just to propose, or how he believed soil could remember kindness. He always said I'd come back one day. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had to leave to understand what coming back would actually mean. Some evenings I walk to the far end of the annex fields, past the solar irrigation trials, past the children's garden plots, to the old wooden bench Grandpa built by hand, its legs slightly crooked at the back, worn smooth from time. From there I can see the stars, real ones, not the glow-in-the-dark ones we stuck on my bedroom ceiling when I was 9. But they make me think of that girl anyway, the one who asked too many questions, the one who kept wondering even when no one listened, the one they tried to bury beneath a sister's spotlight and a family's silence. She never gave up, and now she's built a world where she doesn't have to hide anymore. And on nights like that, when the wind moves just right through the trees, I swear I can hear him, his voice not loud but certain. Write the things they don't understand. One day, the world will. And now, it does. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you most? What did it take for you to reclaim your voice and your future? Share your story in the comments. And if Claire's journey hit home, give this video a like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell so you don't miss the next story of resilience, redemption, and rising above. You're not invisible. You're just not done yet.